Hello and welcome to the Brazil Expat Journal of the BJ you can trust. We got one person listening already. What's up? Whoever you may be. How are you? Ooh, I'm just enjoying my intro music. What's up, Peter? How you doing?
Not too bad. Busy these days for a change.
I
So
know.
that's
Pete's had a
refreshing.
180. A
Yep.
180. Yes, fortunes have turned. We were just talking about things that follow us in our lives. And one of them, guys, is just for me, and especially in Brazil, because Brazil, Pete knows this, is this place where electronics is very complicated, especially just outlets. Like there's a million outlets for everything. So you're already kind of in a bad situation down here for dealing with electronics, with figuring out how to plug things in. But then everything's got bad connection. Like, everything you hear about this getup that I have has bad connection, from the wire that goes from the microphone to the little mixer, from the wire that goes from here to here. So the whole beginning of the show, I'm just tinkering with wires. It's very annoying, and especially when you got it in your ear, you can hear the slightest little thing that's off, and it's really annoying. But I'm here. I'm glad to see you guys. I'm trying to be a little bit more visual here, but I can't promise it's going to be all the time. But I did want to say hi to everyone. Tonight on the show, what are we going to be talking about? This is going to be a doozy of a show, Pete. Are you ready for this? We're talking politics. Okay. A whole lot of politics. It's a topic that Pete runs from a little bit for good reason. I've run from it of late, especially Brazilian politics, because it's a bit insane. But I do feel, and I really feel this way, that you got to know a little bit of what's going on just so you can make the right decisions for yourself, because it's the country's wild. There you go. That's what I wanted to do. My little thumbnail there, because it's a wild country. It's up and down, and knowing what you can or can't do down here is really gonna make a difference. So you got to know a little bit of the laws, a little bit of how the country runs, so you don't get yourself in any trouble. By the way, we got Life Is early on the show. What is up? She
Hey.
says hello, Phil and Pete. Life is. I was telling Pete this the other day. I'm terrible at this. I'm terrible with, like, in real life, remembering people's names and stuff like that. Forget it, like on social media. So please, again, remind me. Is it he is or she is? Because you notice every time I mention you, I'm like, you is. I try to like mix the he and she together. I apologize so much because you're such a great fan of the show. But all these internet names just kind of confuse me. Life is. So if you could just do that for me so I don't misgender you every time when I say he or she is listening. But guys, we got a little bit, we're going to talk politics definitely. Uh, and yeah, we're definitely not going to get into like a debate, guys. It's definitely not going to be liberal versus conservative. In fact, that's one of the things that as I was studying up for this show, I kind of realized, and I kind of had a feeling about it, but then I got it confirmed after I was reading up on a little bit of the history here, is that it's not really. Oh, there you go. I am a man. There you go. So I will remember that it's he is here. So glad to have you here with us as always. But guys, yeah, when you think of Brazilian politics, you can't bring your American or European or wherever you're from mentality to the game, because there are similarities, but there are a lot of differences, guys. Like a lot of differences, and it's not all about left versus right. Oh, it's not all about left versus right either. It's a little bit you're gonna see about landowners versus the elite. Like that's the main division down here. So we will definitely get into that. But before we do, look at this, guys, because it is the news part of the show. And remember last week, actually, oh, I forgot to pull one little news bit up that I really want to talk about. 1 second, guys. Sorry, last minute, and I forgot to mention him last last show, which is this guy named Pete. Have you ever seen these graffitis down here in São Paulo that says Carlos Adão? It's like this green graffiti. You ever see these or no?
No, I don't get up
I'm sure you
much.
have. Oh, come on, Pete. It's like the first thing that I saw when I came to São Paulo that I thought was kind of crazy. Look at this. You never seen these? They're like they're like a staple of São Paulo, guys. These are everywhere. Pete, now that I mentioned it, I promise you, you're going to start because you're going to be looking for it. You're going to see these everywhere. So I got to São Paulo like in 2008, right? And that was one of the first things that stood out to me because I had a long bus trip. I lived in this city called Taboão da Serra, and I'd have to go all the way to Moema every day. There were no metros, no nothing. I took like three buses sometimes to get to work. And it was a long ride, sometimes 2 hours, like with no traffic. So on the way, what do? You stare out the window a lot, and a lot of things that I saw. One thing that I noticed a lot was this, I kept seeing this green, the green stood out, reminded me of like the Hulk or something. And always Carlos Adon, Carlos Adon. And it became like a mystery, like almost, where in the world is Carmen San Diego? And like maybe one Carlos Adon sign is going to lead to another one. And it ends up, it's an actual guy whose name is Carlos Adon, and he was a graffiti artist, and he died. He died just this week. I believe he was 71 years old. He was an economist and urban artist, and he lived right here in Taboão da Serra. And guys, this is one thing that I tell you: do things when you get the chance. Because I had finally found him. Like I figured out that he was a real person. I went digging, and I realized he was a real guy. And I wanted to meet him. People said he was a real nice guy. If you ever did end up meeting him, and just say hi, because it was just something weird. It's part of São Paulo. It's Carlos Adão. And I didn't do it. I should have done it. I mean, I would have loved to be able to share a picture with him right now. And it just seemed like a cool dude. And it's like one of the many oddities inside of a city that is already very odd is Carlos Adão. So rest in peace. But I wanted to get to this too because last week we were talking about the train situation here. Like the one train caught on fire, the other one, like the top blew off. All this crazy stuff is happening. And guys, and then another train. Actually, there was another train that caught on fire, but then a train derailed 2 days in a row. Trains derailed, if I'm not mistaken. And you're seeing here on the Instagram page that I follow called Sob Trilhos. Okay. And you can see everybody walking outside because the train just totally went off the rails. And the worst, look at this. It's like it's coming down totally off the rails. There it is. Yeah. And it's insanity down here. I don't know what's going on, but you can always trust this in Brazil. Like I was saying last week about my friend's daughter, Brazilians are chill. So while all this mess is going on, like this is inside the train while it's about to, like somebody is trying to break the door to get out. There's the train derailed. But check this out. This is what I thought was funny, Pete. In the midst of all this, Brazilians find a way to entertain. So there's a guy that does a live show. Oh yeah. Adriano Ricardo Oficial for anybody that wants to follow him. Oh, there's my friend there, Andarilho Shah. And there's Adriano. Yeah. So guys, that's the one thing about Brazil. Like even in the midst of like something really crazy like that, Brazilians will find a way to like make light of it and just survive. But it's weird. I don't know what's going on in the metro. It's got me a little bit nervous because I take the metro 5 days a week. But yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
weird stuff
was
goes.
this on like the main line or was it on the line? No, this is like it looks like the line one or
It, yeah, it's the Diamond Line or Emerald, I think. So
okay.
no, Diamante, Diamond Line. It's the one that goes to Itapevi. It's the one you can get
Yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah. It's the one that services
Chicago,
well, one of the two that services the suburbs.
which is a scary line, guys. I've been on this train. This is like the newer one. You should have seen like back in the day, like the old trains. Let me see if I can find a picture here. Linha Diamante trens antigos. And you get the old trains. I don't know if they got any picture. Oh, there they are. Look at that. I used to ride on these, Pete. This was
Yeah, me
hardcore
too.
back in the day. Yeah, when I first got to São Paulo, and they were scary, man. At night, when you're riding on those, like at 11 at night, and you're like, it's just you and like three other motherfuckers inside or
I
three
know
other
the
people.
stations are scary too.
Yeah,
And
very,
that line services some pretty inhospitable neighborhoods.
very, very much so. So there's a little bit of that happening. And another thing that's kind of depressing, and I guess this is all getting into politics because it's like, it seems like everything just in Portuguese they have an expression "adeus dará," like just leaving it to God. It's in God's hands, basically. It doesn't seem like there's anybody really managing the city. And one thing that's scary, Pete, for us, because we live near the quebrada, we live near the ghetto, is that usually there's like a law, right? You don't rob in the ghetto. And look at this. I've been seeing a lot more of this. One is in Jaqueline, which is the ghetto that's like right here close to my house that I pretty much lived there for a long time. I was always in and out because I got family there. But then Sapé is another one that's really close to my house, about like a 10-minute, 15-minute walk. And yeah, they got like these guys here. They're just stealing. They're gonna, this guy's gonna be the watch out guy, and you're gonna see these two kids here. They're gonna take something out of the hood of this car. I couldn't figure out what it was. Módulos de carro, car molds. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but guys, that's the state of the city right now. It's kind of wild. We got a lot of, I don't know, Pete. It just seems like there's nobody really taking care of the city. Do you know the name of the current mayor of São Paulo?
I do not. The last mayor I remember died in office, so I haven't really kept track of it since then.
Wait, what mayor died in office? Was I here for that?
Yeah, yeah, he had like cancer or something.
Oh, he didn't die, but he almost did. Yeah, this was Bruno Covas.
Oh,
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's the guy I was thinking
he did
of.
die. He did die. He did die in 2020. Oh my God, I didn't even realize that he had died. And now we got a guy named Ricardo Nunes. So, yeah, this is an election year, guys. So a lot of these topics are coming up, and you start to see a lot of these stories more and more as election season comes for obvious reasons, right? But here we have some of the mayors of São Paulo. So right now, the guy that wants to go come back is this guy Fernando Haddad, but
Who ran for president, right?
who ran for president. It's going to be interesting, guys. It's going to be an interesting election because Fernando Haddad. We'll get into who he is in a little bit, but he was the mayor. He wasn't very popular. Uh, he lost in like everywhere basically. Look at this.
Yeah, well, because he
This
was
was
Lula's boy at the height of the Lava
yeah.
Jato scandal. So being associated with the PT in any way was like
Yes.
political suicide at the time.
And also he tried to run for the prefeitura of São Paulo, and he didn't get a lot of votes either. And he didn't get a lot of votes where it usually counts, which is more in the yeah. Here they're saying when he was elected. I should have. I meant to bring that up because he really lost in a lot of the areas where you think that he would win. This is the election for governor, which he also didn't do too well. This guy Tarcísio, who isn't a great guy, won. So, guys, one thing as we get into the how Brazilian politics work, me and Pete pretty much hate them all. We laugh about it. We're not stressing about it. So we're gonna talk bad about the left. We're gonna talk bad about the right. If you are a sensitive type, if you got a pet politician, pet side, this is not the show for you because they're all BS artists. They're all BS artists. So we're gonna get into that, Pete, right now. Okay? Can I give one last announcement before that, which is this? On the 28th, which is next week on Wednesday, I will be at 321 Club Bar. It's going to be at 1224 Rua Morato Coelho in Vila Madalena. I'm going to be there with Drum Wilson, his band, JP on the bass, Paulinho on the guitar, DJ Gilmar, which is awesome. I love jazz rap. I've been there a bunch of times. And we're going to have Jordan Elena from Só, Beto Cruz, a great rapper, Suds, who sings too. They're going to be singing, and I'm going to be the host, guys. There's my name right there, host, feel right. And it's the Forbidden Session. So next Monday, I'll see if we can get Brandon on to say a little something about this, but that's what's happening. So, guys, Brazil, when you think about Brazil, Pete, in the politics, what's the first thing that comes to mind if you were to compare it to the politics from Canada? Like the base, just like the base, how the country started, the main idea of what Canada is. Because I can do that for the US. Can you do that for Canada versus Brazil? Like what's the main division?
Yeah. Well, I think in Brazil, the biggest difference between Canada is there is no middle ground. Like
Uh-huh.
the political party that traditionally has won the majority of Canadian elections are the
Hmm.
Liberal Party. But when we say the Liberal Party, this is the party, the most famous Canadian Prime Minister of, the last 25 years is probably Justin Trudeau, and that's his party.
Yes.
But when Americans hear liberal, they think leftist, which is not really what the Liberal Party of Canada is. The Liberal Party of Canada is they're centrists. They're
Hmm.
basically people pleasers. They try and promise every side everything and try and accommodate them all, which is not really possible. But yeah, people tend to vote for them because they're not too far to the left, they're not too far to the right. The far
Yeah.
left party is the NDP, and they've never won a federal election. The far right party are the progressive conservatives who have won a few elections, but like calling them far right compared to, say, the American Republican Party is ridiculous. Like the American
Hmm.
Republican Party is much further right than the progressive conservatives in Canada
Yeah.
because, for one thing, you cannot get elected on a religious platform in Canada. Even if other religious people won't vote for you, they're like, you
Yeah.
keep that to yourself.
Let me just cut you off a little bit so we don't get too deep into Canadian politics. But I think the main point which you made is that, guys, it's different. Okay, we're in a different country. We have a different mindset. Even if you, Pete, sometimes you think about left and right. I mean, we're gonna start with Cabral. Cabral discovered Brazil. There was no left and right even back then. So you can't think of Brazil left, right. It's just fight. It
Oh, but
exists.
it is though. Like when it comes down, because we have
Exactly, but that's
the
more modern.
the
But that's
electoral
more modern.
process here, and this has been every election since I've lived in Brazil,
Yes.
is that if the president doesn't win or the presidential candidates don't win by a majority, then they
Yeah.
have a runoff. And the
Yeah.
runoff always comes down to someone who is far left, like really far left, and someone who is really far right.
Well, yes
There's
and no.
never like a middle ground in a runoff.
I yes and no. I think you'd be surprised by a little bit of that because it's very modern how divided. You know, even when I was here, wasn't that when I first got here, it wasn't that bad. There was always a little bit, but since then it's gotten worse, and the tendency is for it to continue to get worse. But guys, basically you got to go like this, even when you're thinking about race stuff, anything that just culture. It's not the same country, so you can use your country as a reference, and there's definitely references even with US, Brazil, things that are similar, but you can't go 100% with that, right? Brazil, for example, it started with a totally different mentality than with the Americans, okay, or with Europeans, English. When the Portuguese came here, they didn't come down here to colonize, to build, to think, hey, this is going to be the next place that we live. They came here to do what? Take a lot of gold, take a lot of stuff back to the crown. Whereas in the US or Canada, I imagine, is similar. There was a different mentality of like, no, we actually want to settle here. And guys, again, please, of course, there were horrible things that happened during this settlement, right? This is the very surface level version of what's happening. But we're just talking about how the countries were created, different mentalities completely. Because when you want to settle a place, you want to take care of it. You want to create a little bit of organization in the place. And also remember that the English, the Protestants, and all that stuff, they already kind of like against the church, against kind of the monarch structure, even as they were leaving England. Whereas here, no, like the monarchy and all that stuff continued for a long time. So yeah, basically it was the king, his colonial administration, the landowners. the church, and then you got the enslaved people. These were the categories of people that lived here in Brazil at the time, with the indigenous population also being enslaved. So we're not really talking about right left, but this slavery becomes fundamental. And you know that Brazil is the last country to have abolished slavery because the whole economy was really based on this plantation, right? Brazil has a lot more land for this than the US ever did or will have. So there were a lot of slaves putting a lot of money out, and that continued for a very long time. We're going to see that this is what creates like the class structure down here in Brazil, and that relates directly to the politics. And then the royal court ends up coming to Brazil. This f's things up even more, Pete, because now, I think it was what, Napoleon, he invaded Portugal, so the Portuguese, they all fled to Rio, right? So now Brazil wasn't just a colony anymore. It was like actually part of the Portuguese Empire, and that really uh, puts more of that mindset down here, which I still think exists, not just in Brazil, but I think in a lot of Latin American countries. You get that sense that the colonialist mindset is still very much alive and well. Like in the US, we have, I guess, the settler mindset. This is mine now as I move further and further west. But the colonialist mindset is different because it's more about just who is in power and why they deserve to be there, which I still think you see to this day, Pete. Like Brazil is extremely classist, but you're going to see that a lot of, not a lot, but it's mainly the classes are cut based on race lines, because Brazilians love to say that when you call them out for their racism. They're like, we're not racist, we're classist. Yeah, but how do you divide the classes, man? Right? Anyway, eventually Brazil does get a little bit of independence in 1822. We get Pedro the First. He wants to maintain the social hierarchy. Okay, important. Okay, he doesn't want this revolutionary change. It's a little bit more democratic, but not that much. Eventually, he abdicates, and then we have these regents, which take over Brazil from 1831 to 1840, and then you got Pedro II. Eventually, you're going to get all the way to Princess Isabel. Okay, she was a regent. She's famous because she signed the declaration that abolished slavery in 1888. Guys, that's how late it was down here. Um, but of course, it was like a whole movement. A lot of white Brazilians love to paint her as this white hero. That saved the slaves. No, she did what was politically convenient for her to do based on what people were trying to push for a very long time, which is to free black people. But what happens here? We get a bunch of slaves, and this is where, again, I'm going this far back because it helps you to understand what's going on today. Because imagine, Pete, you got 4 million slaves that are now not slaves. Where the hell are they going to go, Pete?
Mhm.
With nothing, there's no
Well,
social net
the
for
U.S. had
them.
the same problem.
Who? Well, you cut out for a second. Say
The
that again.
U.S. The U.S. had the
Well,
same
no,
problem.
actually, yes and no, because in the
I said the
U.S.,
U.S.
yeah, but in the U.S. they had some, the
had the
Bureau
same
of Black
problem.
Affairs. They put some programs into place to help black people a little bit, even though they lied about a lot of the stuff. So at least there was something at the beginning. But then after Abraham Lincoln was
Yeah,
assassinated, because he was the
but this is
proponent
how
of a lot of
you
these.
yeah, but this is how you wound up with these like racially segregated cities like
Exactly.
Detroit, Los Angeles, where you had just like entire neighborhoods of poor, displaced black people who
Uh
were
huh.
freed slaves. I mean, there were a lot of stories of people who were like, geez, can't I stay? Like, great to be free, but where am I going to go? So and in
Exactly.
Brazil, this is where the favela system came from.
Yeah, and I think what because then part of that is true that as far as, okay, I'm free now, where do I go? But again, there's a big asterisk, two big asterisks when it comes to the US, which I think really changes the trajectory of black Americans versus black Brazilians. Is that one, in the US they did put some programs together like immediately after slavery. But of course you saw, or the end of slavery, but you saw Lincoln was assassinated, a lot of that stuff stopped, and you get the black codes and you get Jim Crow, that stuff that's happening in the South. But that already gives an impetus, gives Black Americans a leg forward, a leg up, I should say, compared to Brazilian Black folks. But then the other thing, Pete, that I think is interesting that happens in America is just a philosophy, of what it is to be an American. Even though Blacks went as slaves, like it or not, they're in the American culture, so they pick up the American culture, and a lot of the American culture is that rugged individualism. It's property. It's, less government. Let's go out and find our way. And I think Blacks in America benefited from that a bit more. So much so that there's a lot of research that says that the time of the greatest amount of growth and wealth for Black Americans in history, okay, including today, is that period right after slavery, where you saw a lot of Black people acquire a lot of capital, a lot of land, and really grow. And then, of course, the U.S. government came in and said, let's end that game. Let's blow cities up. Whereas in Brazil, there was just nothing. It was just, you're free. So a lot of these Black slaves, a lot of the slaves, they just stayed on a plantation, which eventually become these favelas, et cetera, et cetera. But also it created this rift between the farmers, which again, it's so interesting when I started reading up on this, because it's what's still happening today, these agrarian wars that we still have to this day. We have the MST, the Movimento Sem Terras, the landless movement down here, which are fighting for these rights, even though, for some people they're terrorists. For others, they're like, yeah, they're heroes, because they're the ones that are really fighting for our free land rights out in this big country. And the elites are up there trying to control everything. It's very interesting that this was basically the fight from the beginning. And the farmers were pissed because you ended slavery. Now we don't have any way to make money. But that's it also when the republic begins. Okay, this guy Deodoro Fonseca, he takes over. He overthrows the monarchy, uh, and there's a lot of federalism, secularism. Says here some anti-monarchism, elite interest. Brazil and the U.S. have a closer relationship. In fact, I did it kind of as a joke, but maybe just to catch your attention. But Brazil was actually called the United States of Brazil, like when it first became a republic. And the flag actually looks a lot like the American flag, which is that flag you see in the thumbnail there with the green and yellow stripes and the stars. It's very funny. When I discovered that a couple years ago, I was like, oh, yeah. And I see you guys in the comments. I'll get there in a second. We're kind of doing history lesson today, guys. I've been wanting to expand the BJ, and this is one of the ways that I'm trying to expand it, guys, and just make it a show where you learn stuff. It takes a little bit more effort, to get all the information down and everything, but it's kind of cool too. And by the way, next week, we're going to have a really interesting guest, a really dear friend of mine, and it's going to be good. I'm not going to spoil it for you. We're going to talk a lot about Minas, okay? But we're going to have a really good guest. But yes, there's Brazil at the time. It became this republic. And again, it's still, the idea here is that Brazil wants to be a bit more modern, okay? But it's still this ruling class versus this regular class, to the point where there's this era, Pete, from 1894 to 1930, which kind of coincides with America's Gilded Age, where there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of patronage, electoral manipulation, and a lot of these coffee barons were always elected to become president. So either they came from Sao Paulo or Minas Gerais. And again, you see that the government that we still have today is forming, like that seven-headed beast that's just bloated. It's an oligarchy. It's what's the word, Pete? Crony capitalism. I know, like, nowadays people are very much like, Brazil's very left and this and that. We hate capitalism. Guys, you have the worst version of it. You have crony capitalism down here. So eventually you do get presidents of the First Republic. I'm not going to go over all of them, guys. There's a lot. Okay. The guy that is the big one, that really A lot of these guys are either military people, a little bit more conservative. They do have a closer relationship with the U.S. If you have never read the Rockefeller letters, do it. It's a great book that explains a lot about the relationship that the U.S. has had with Latin America since the 1920s, since Theodore Roosevelt, and actually Woodrow Wilson even also continued like dollar diplomacy in trying to the corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, where the Monroe Doctrine said to Europe, "Hey, you stay over there, America's ours." And that kind of ended the conflict between the two sides. But then what's his name? Theodore Roosevelt comes around and says, "I'm going to add to that. In Latin America is ours. So please stay to your side of the earth. This is us." So, Pete, this creates this kind of anonymity with Latin Americas, because they're like, America's supposed to be our friend, but it seems like they're just doing exactly what Europe does. It's just coming here, colonizing, taking our stuff, and really only giving us bread and crumbs. That becomes important as these revolutionary new ideas come about, like in the early 1900s, right? That's when we get this guy, Getulio Vargas. Have you heard of Getulio Vargas, Pete?
I have not.
Okay, he's the big president here. Actually, he committed suicide, if I'm not mistaken. Now, guys, a lot of people consider him to be like left wing, left wing, left wing. But again, that wasn't really the fight. Okay, the fight was like labor, nationalism, and of course, it does have this Marxist feel to it, but it's state intervention, it's authoritarianism, but it's kind of anti-communist, right? You can still be authoritarian and have state intervention and have this big bloated state and not necessarily be from the left. So it's kind of anti-communist. His government created a lot of labor institutions, expanded state economic intervention. Okay, he creates the Ministry of Labor. So that's when he starts to think Brazil needs to become an industrial nation instead of an agricultural appendage, because a lot of these economic types, they'll tell you what divides a first world nation from a developing nation from a third world nation. It's the output of the nation, right? If you're more agrarian, if you're doing agriculture, you're probably third world to developing, and then if you're industrialized, you were not being considered a third world nation. But unfortunately, Pete, this guy becomes a dictator. And guys, by the way, there's a very surface version of all of this. And my fact checkers out in the audience, please fact check me. It's not a problem. But this guy, Pete, he closes the Congress. Parties were abolished. Censorship expanded. And he introduced a lot of social and labor reforms, but he also established a dictatorship. So his regime pursued this state-led kind of industrialism and nationalism, and he eventually becomes more left. Okay, because the old political structure I got here: plantation, landowner, rural patron, politician. Vargas, he wanted a different machine. He wanted the state with labor regulations, unions, urban workers, and political support. So this becomes like the Workers' Party kind of mentality even before the Workers' Party. Even though they're not originally Marxist, it kind of fits, after a while. And that's where the US starts to get a little nervous, of course, because this is World War II. We're getting a little bit of our tension, between the Soviet Union and the United States. Cuba has gone communist. So what do you think America is doing? Okay, America's down here messing with all these countries, trying to install governments and get them to not go with the Soviet Union, right? Democracy did return. Vargas was overthrown, but he did come back. Okay, he won through elections. He wanted to, learn from my mistakes, but he still was pushing the same stuff. But it's one of these strange stories in Brazil, Pete. He committed suicide in 1954. We get Kubitschek, who was a bit more of a development, guy, not socialist. We have Juscelino Kubitschek Avenue. So Brazil tries to go, I guess, back to a more central role. But Eventually, this doesn't work. There's more, left right fighting around this time. The Brazilian Communist Party starts growing. The Cuban revolutions happens in 59. There were strikes, land movements, student activism. Everybody's kind of mad. What is going on? So there's a coup. Okay. And the coup lasts. Oh, I just unplugged my. There we go. And the clue 64 is when the military presidents come in. Okay, some people call it a junta because they were elected, so it was kind of democratic, but they all came from like the same pool of people. So what difference does that make, guys? There was torture, not a fun time, but also a time that Brazil industrialized a lot. This is when Brazil really started to industrialize during this time, and also a time which is sad to say, Pete, but for me, it's like the time when Brazilian like music, books. I guess when you're like under the gun, you put out your best work. I don't know, because there's a lot of great protest music, a lot of very subversive bands and music that comes out, and movies that come out at this time. And guys, this military junta dictatorship lasted for a very long time, all the way until 1985, I believe, was the first. Uh, yeah, Tancredo Neves. I remember him. He died. I was still in Brazil, and I remember, Pete, when I was little, I'd say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I'd say, "I want to be president." And then this guy died, and I changed it to bus driver. I wanted to be a bus driver when I grew up. And 85 to 90, that's when we get the new constitution, and that's where we get to where we are kind of today. Okay, because what happens? The 88 constitution, okay, kind of feels like it's a left wing constitution. Why? Because we just came out of a military dictatorship. So it's asking for social rights, health rights, education rights, labor rights, social security. SUS is created around this time. Okay. So modern Brazil, if you're coming from the US, is going to feel a bit more left just at its roots than in the U.S. Or England, or I don't know how much France is. I know there's a lot of French people down here, as far as politically how strong the right wing is there. But in the U.S., England, and Pete said not in France, but in the U.S. and England, obviously the right wing does hold some power. But it's what I like about it is it always goes back and forth. It never stays with one for too long, which is kind of healthy in a way, but manic in another. But and then you come to Brazil, and I tell you, my first impression, and you tell me, Pete, what your first impression is like, which is a strange thing to say. Like I could actually feel the government. I don't know how else to explain it. Like in the U.S., you watch the news, you see, Bill Clinton's getting a blowjob, whatever. America's bombing some other country, whatever. 9/11 definitely felt real for sure, but it's like you live. I at least just live my life. I'm like, whatever. Here, it's like I couldn't escape like the government. It was like taxes, and it was like uh, on TV. This person needs to pay this guy because he made a joke about her dead fetus, and I'm like, oh, they got censorship down here, and oh, you got to pay an extra tax for this and extra. Yeah, especially when you get to the red tape, you feel the government. What about you, Pete? What did you feel? Did you feel that government push down here or no?
No, not really.
I imagine. Yeah.
I live pretty far off the grid, so I mean,
Yes.
it's not really something that's on my radar or even affects my life because I really don't exist. I live in this like gray limbo world.
Which is the good part about Brazil, guys. You can escape all of this, but it definitely, it's a different feel, and I think it's important for you to know that, and that's why I went as far back as I did, for you to just see that it's like just the line of history is just the elite are up there. So although we get this dictatorship, and I'm getting to get to everybody's comments in just a little bit, I'm getting here to the end here, is that although yes, we won freedom again, a lot like these military guys, a lot of them stayed in the government. It's not like we got rid of the bad guy, we locked them up, and then they're done. They continue to live
Bolsonaro
on.
is one of the military guys.
Great supporter of the military dictatorship, you know. So we get Fernando Collor was another president. He's the one that was impeached, but he's still in power. That's where, for me, that's when Brazil starts getting silly, like Pete and I were saying last week, because this guy Fernando Collor guy, guys, he had such mismanagement of the economy that there was a point where he had to freeze everybody's bank accounts. Like, people committed suicide over this guy because it just one day all of your money was gone because he just, it was runaway inflation. He was impeached, but guess what? I think he's a senator now. Itamar Franco was another guy. Um, who did break Brazil's hyperinflation. And then the more modern presidents, a little bit before I got here, which was FHC, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, which, again, Pete, that's what I was saying. You're kind of right and wrong when it comes to like Brazil. You always see like one right wing, one left wing. But in the end, it's all kind of central left. Like, there's no even Bolsonaro. And I'll get to why I say that about Bolsonaro. For me, is not extreme right, and I have a very, there's a reason for that why I feel that way. But Fernando Henrique Cardoso, you get this guy's. He's from the PSDB, which is the Socialist Democratic Party of Brazil. So he's a social democratic. He'd be more closer to, what's going up in Norway, Finland, or Bernie Sanders. He's a Bernie Sanders type. But it's what the part that was bizarre for me, Pete, is that at one point he was called like a fascist. Like, he was considered extreme right. And I'm like, how is he extreme right? It's just like the stick keeps, the yardstick keeps going up because he's a fascist. And then after Bolsonaro came, he was just okay. He was like an okay guy. But he did introduce the real. He introduced a lot of market reforms. He introduced the beginning of like the social welfare program that Lula, when he came in, took even deeper. Now Lula, he's been around since the 80s, guys. Remember that stuff about the trabalhistas, the workers? Again,
Yeah, he came up out of the unions.
yeah, he came up out of the unions, and these unions and the farmers are super powerful here, in terms of like, well, I shouldn't say, yeah, maybe super powerful isn't the word I'm looking for. They're super important. Okay, like they don't lay back and just let things slide. So when you get a guy like Lula who's working for the unions, representing the workers and representing, even though he doesn't want to go too far because he
Well,
in
he
the end,
initially did, though. In the beginning, he was a full-on Marxist Leninist, but
and he's
he
gotten more
dialed it
centrist.
back. He
Very
dialed
much
it
so.
back quite a bit.
Very much so. No, he was, and but that's a whole movement. So when you're down here in Brazil, you see people get very emotional about these topics because they go back generations. It's not like a new thing with these farms. It's these farms that have been in people's families for generations. It's the struggle that you see with the indigenous folk. So property rights. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a show on property, or like, because that seems to be the key to it all, Pete. I didn't have enough time to really dig in, but it seems like in the U.S. at least, there's a very clear definition of what your property is and what the government can or can't do with it. And it does not seem like it's that clear down here in Brazil, even just from like friends that I have that have tried to sell homes and buy homes, and how complicated, even knowing if like the contract that the owner has is the same as the contract that the bank has. I've told this story on the show, how when I first came to Brazil, I stayed with my friend Kimmy. They were living in two houses because they had bought a house, but then at the last minute, as they're getting rid of the house they were living in, they're like, yeah, but the bank version of the measurements of the house do not match the owner's version of the measurement of the house. And they were basically paying for two houses until they could get this straightened out and be able to give this house back to the bank or wherever it needed to go. It's complicated. So I think that may be the root of a lot of problems. Let me know there in the audience if you know more about the topic, because that is stuff that interests me. But yes, like Pete said, Lula dialed it back. Who didn't is Dilma. So Dilma was a bit more left, I think, than Lula, or at the very least, she didn't know how to play the game as well as Lula. You see Lula now. I just said last week I might vote for him next election, and I'm like the biggest Lula basher there ever was. I probably won't vote for anyone, but if it's him over another Bolsonaro, I would vote for Lula this time around. Uh, and why? Because he knows how to dial it back. He knows how to play the game. He's a smart dude. He's a smart politician. Now Dilma, yeah, can't say the same for her. Poor girl.
Yeah, she was an ex-guerrilla too
Yes, she was
during
tortured,
the
guys.
dictatorship. Yes, exactly.
She
So
was
yeah,
tortured during the
you could
dictatorship.
say she is uncompromising.
Uh, yeah, she tried to like. There was I remember when the economy was really going through it. Was it you that call it the Dilma apocalypse? I like how you say that, the Dilma apocalypse,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, and the this is just I'll scroll through this in the back. There's pictures of her. These are just details of the torture that she had to go through. Um, she did put somebody up there, I think from Harvard University or something like that, like just to kind of. It just came off as just her trying, like too little, too late, like just trying to do something a little bit more organized with the economy, but it was horrible, guys. And then, of course, with all the mess that came with Duma, what do you expect is going to happen? That's the part that's so reactionary and
Yeah,
so
well, the thing
stupid. I
is,
mean,
the
I guess
economy
politics is always
collapsed.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah, the economy collapsed during Doma's presidency, and she took most of the heat for it. But a big
yeah.
part of the reason why it collapsed was because of economic policies that were installed by Lula, who basically then handed over the reins to her. So she
Did you
basically
hear now?
inherited a house of cards.
I know. Not there was not much she could do about it, and then after she gets impeached, we get this guy that was like Dracula, which I've shown on the show before. Don't need to show him again. Temer. He kind of got the
Remember?
situation, but the same way that the military, that's the thing, one feeds the other. The same way that the military dictatorship fed this new social democratic left, right? Which understood that, being Marxist, hardcore, blowing up banks left is just not going to get it done because the average person is just not going to be down with that. You got to be able to talk to the middle, right? In the middle can go both ways, guys. And a lot of people don't like to hear this, but it's just facts. When Bolsonaro won the election, he won majority of the votes he won. He almost won on the first turn. And he got almost the same electorate vote that Lula got. He got the Northeast. There was like one or two states in the Northeast that definitely said "F you, no way." But he got a bunch of the Northeast. He got a bunch of the black vote, middle class, poor, because he's a populist. Okay,
Hmm.
that's why for me he's not like extreme right. Like he's into the same big government stuff that Lula was into. He became friends to those guys in the middle, like Lula did. For me, he just became like okay, they differ on like three or four major things, but as far as economically, how the country works, how much influence the government wants to have in your life, for me they're like Lula might even be lighter. Lula used to hit on that a little bit harder, and I think he learned his lesson and he's been way lighter on that. At least I haven't heard him say once about internet censorship. I mean, but back then it was like every other day. It was like we need to protect the internet and this, that, and the third. Now Bolsonaro wants to do that shit. So or he did, because he saw that the internet was turning against him. So it's for me, it's the same tactics. It's just they attack different points, right? But
Yeah, but
when you get
Bolsonaro
down
was
here,
really big
go ahead.
on like privatization and like trade
But he didn't do any of
deregulation.
it. He just
No,
didn't do it
because the
though. He,
pandemic hit. I was
I know.
actually I was working with a macroeconomist at
Yeah,
Bradesco, who was actually in charge of the IPO of one of Brazil's biggest banks, Caixa. They were going to like
yeah.
privatize large parts of it, and he was like ready to fly to Europe and meet with the investors. And then, like 3 days before it happened, like the pandemic shut everything down. So a lot of these economic policies that Bolsonaro ran on were in the works to get done, but then the pandemic just squished everything.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it because he had plenty of opportunity. A lot of the stuff didn't even have to go through Congress. I don't want to get into that's what I say. Like I don't even want to get into Bolsonaro and all that stuff. Um, but what I do want to say is this: is that guys, it's a shit show. Whoever wins, it's a merda. Okay, so that's the main thing that you got to remember is that it is that uh, when they get into power, and that's what I mean, Pete. When they get into power, they don't do anything that they said they were gonna do. Like he definitely wasn't making any moves, Pete. Like the pandemic wasn't like the next day after Bolsonaro was elected. He made a bunch of moves. He wasn't making a lot of moves to try to privatize anything. So it's yeah, it's complicated down here, guys. So my advice to you is try to avoid it. Try to do everything in your power. And in this sense, I do say, yes, you have a bit of privilege if you're coming here from another country to kind of, if you can plan well enough, evade a lot of this stuff and not have to deal with it. But the sad part about it is that you're going to see that it's a country of a lot of haves and have nots. Because to this day, it's the ruling elite, which includes Lula and his multi-millionaire not mansions, but like his sitios and apartments. Everything's in this apartment had Lula's name, but it didn't belong to him. You know.
Yeah, an important thing to consider here too is that voting is compulsory here. Like in
Yeah,
Canada, like only about 50% of the population votes,
I know,
which
because you pay like a
explains a
three
lot.
highs tax, but if they can get money out of you, they'll get money out of you. So that's the part that it gets Brazilians frustrated, and it gets me frustrated. It got me frustrated to a point where I said, Pete, I'm not even gonna stress over it anymore, right? Because especially like after Lula won again, after he was like in jail,
Yeah,
and this is no
literally
shade to
walked out
Lula.
of jail. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like it's no shade to Lula. It's just it was so bizarre for me that I'm like I can't take. It's like the you ever see that show Secession, Pete, where the
yeah, of
father
course.
that was a great show, but I love that line at the end where the father's like, "You're not serious people." Like that's the reason I'm not going to give any of this to you. You're not serious, and that's how I felt. I was like, you guys fought to get look how stupid the supposed right wing here, because it's not a right wing, it's a BS wing. You fought to get you eradicated the left, basically. You got Dilma impeached, pretty much eradicated the left. I was pulling up numbers here of Haddad when he ran against Doria. Like Doria kicked his butt. Doria got like 53% of the vote here, and he was like the businessman guy. He like people compared him to Trump, but he was sillier than Trump. He got caught literally with his pants down with a prostitute. Uh, but yeah, look at this: 53-16, right? Percent, and he this guy Haddad, he lost in all of the ghetto areas, which is embarrassing because he's supposed to be representing these people. So they demolished the left. They have Lula in jail, Pete. It's like you won. You beat the fucking video game. You
Hmm.
beat the final boss. And the final boss gets the hell out of jail and gets the presidency again. Like deep inside, I was like, how can I not root for this guy?
Not only that,
Yeah.
but their champion is now in jail where Lula was.
Yo, when that happened, I was like, I'm not looking at it seriously anymore. Like I know it's serious, but it's not. For me, it's like a video game or a weird crazy movie. That's why I think officially I was thinking about being Team Lula. I think I'm pretty much officially gonna be Team Lula. Cause that's a story of a lifetime, dude. That's a story of a lifetime. And it makes no difference. Like the country has been shit for the last 8 years, basically. It's been stagnation since when, Pete? Like we had a little bit of a bump when Bolsonaro was elected. So I'll give him credit for that for about like 6 months or so. I think it's just the economy just excited. the market was just excited. But then the pandemic hit. Yeah, ever since the pandemic, we haven't really come out of that. Was that 2020, the pandemic? And
Yeah,
Brazil's been just suffering, So guys,
yeah,
when you
and
come down here, no,
Lula's
go ahead.
presidency hasn't really seen any real radical policy changes. He's basically
He's
maintained the
coasting.
status quo.
He is coasting, guys. That's why, for me, I prefer coasting right now because I can find ways to hustle and make some money in the coasting than the mess, which I believe it will be if any Bolsonaro is elected or anybody other than Lula
Well,
is
yeah, I'll
elected.
say one thing for
Yeah.
Bolsonaro. He got rid of daylight savings time, so good for him for that.
There you go. Guys, I know I went on forever tonight, but we do have some comments, and I do want to show you a little bit of something special that I think Pete's gonna recognize. But I won't spoil it yet. I'll see if Pete can guess what it is. Um, we got comments though. Life is, and he said the only Canadian politician I know about is Rob Ford. Ford. Oh, sorry, took my glass off. The ex-mayor of Toronto because he was caught on camera smoking crack. Oh, I remember that story. Are there any crazy, wacky politicians in Brazil? A
His
bunch.
brother is actually
In
the
fact, I'm
premier
going to
of
show you.
Ontario now.
I'm going to show you one right now. In just a second, I'm going to show you some really funny political ads down here. A montage of some of the political ads here are really crazy, guys.
There was
But
that
yes,
there was that chick who was caught. She was like a mayor in the Northeast, I think, and she was like living in Europe and running her town but through her Twitter account.
yes. In the one of the most famous is in Brazil. The politician that was caught literally with like underwear, money in his underwear. Remember him?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Oh God, it's yeah. I'm
But
trying to
didn't
get
like
this
the
here.
entire Rio de Janeiro City Council go to jail at one point?
Yeah, yeah, guys, that's a separate show. Actually, that would be a
Yeah.
fun show. It'd be more fun than this one. I gotta do like a list, top 10 list of wacky politics. Life is It's out there. It's out there. A lot of passport bros also like to say Brazil is classist and not racist. Yeah, guys, it's connected. It's one leads to the other, vice
Yeah,
versa.
the
It's
class
yeah,
is decided by race, so it's the same thing.
exactly. So it's exactly like I remember they almost got me in the beginning, Phil, when they told me that, but something about it just didn't sound right. It's like it just I couldn't figure out what it was. It took a little bit of studying, um, but then when I got it, I was like, oh, that's interesting, and it's interesting because always white people used to say that to me. Anyway, El Camino, he says y'all. Okay, cool and interesting. Uh, although I see the little hand there. It's hey y'all, hey y'all. You gotta tell me how to pronounce this handle here, Pete. Is it El Camalointo? I always call it El Camino, like I don't know. It's this religious path that you take in Spain. That's what it reminds me of, but I can never pronounce this, Pete. So if you know how to pronounce this, it's El
No,
Camalointo.
no,
It's a
it's Al Camalonti.
El Camalointi, but there's an L at the end. You got to give us the phonetic pronunciation of your handle, El Camalointi, and then Jam. What's that? 5619. Cool and interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, it was probably messed up in about 10 different parts. So, my fact checkers, get on my case. Tell me I was being too soft on the dictators and all that stuff. I'll be glad to read your comments. You have provided informative content about history of Brazil. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Guys, look at this. This is very informative content right here. This is from the New York Times. Here we go. Hopefully, I can play this, and hopefully, you can hear it. So let me know.
Raio privatizador!
Contra comunista.
Welcome to election season in Brazil. This is Simon Romero for the New York Times.
Você de casa me achou engraçado?
The ads on television and social media are surreal, but the political campaigns are serious.
Minha mãe vai votar em mim, eu vou votar em mim. Agora só falta vocês, todo povo do Rio de Janeiro.
Before Brazilians go to the polls in October, some memorable candidates are using humor, eccentricity, and free airtime to mock the establishment or otherwise stand out from the crowd.
Maconha é legal. O mundo já aprovou e o Brasil precisa evoluir. Lucas, presidente da HC 4520.
The tradition stretches back to the 90s to Enéas Carneiro, a well-known presidential candidate
This guy was
and
crazy.
congressman,
Speaking of crazy people.
and has continued over the years.
Tempos ele vem se preparando para esse combate. Agora, precisa apenas do seu voto. Super
Já tô indo.
There's a subgenre of superheroes.
O Homem-Aranha não tem opção. Lugar de ladrão é na prisão.
This year's heroes included Jesus,
Não vote quem está no poder.
a devil,
Eu sou o soninho do diabo. Por isso, eu taco fogo.
and Osama bin Laden, a costume that also appeared in 2012.
Para detonar a corrupção, vote 45-125. Vote Bilal.
Don't forget Geraldo Green.
And some choose protest candidates like Tiririca or Grumpy.
Oh, he was actually pretty good.
Eu votei. De novo eu vou votar.
He's now a congressman running for re-election by impersonating an aging Brazilian pop star.
Ele é o seu lugar.
And for those who prefer a more seasoned politician, there's always Barack Obama. Several, actually.
Claudio. The guy's name was Claudio and he killed Barack Obama. I remember this song when I got to Brazil. Oh, I remember when I first got to Brazil, man. Sweet memories of when I got to Brazil and they would just, when I was walking by the feira, the people would just say, Obama, Obama. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that. And Pete, see if you, let me see, I don't want to share the screen because I want to know if Pete recognizes this noise right here. See if you can hear this, Pete. What is that? Can you hear it? Can you hear it? You know what that is?
Yeah.
All right, guys, this is something else that happens a lot here in Brazil. Saucepan banging.
Cafferolà fue en Brasil durante un mensaje
Oh, yeah.
You can hear this. Hopefully it's coming through.
a una iniciativa de la oposición en 22 ciudades
Let
del
me
país.
know
Los
in the
brasileños
I thought you were asking me like
habían
if I recognized like what was being said. But yeah, the
secretario del
sauce-
gobernante Partido de los Trabajadores en el
Yeah,
que
guys.
participaba la presidenta brasileña.
So there's Dilma right there.
Rousseff ha intentado transmitir un mensaje.
And guys, if you think it is just we hate the left thing, check this out. During the coronavirus, Bolsonaro got the same treatment. It's from the Guardian. Oh my God. Yeah, I lived through all of this. Actually, one of the few times I yelled at my neighbor, my ex-neighbor, Pete. Look, I live in this thing, guys, that here in Brazil they call casa de fundos. It's like a back house, right? There's a front gate. You walk down the corridor, you see there's a front house, and then you keep walking, and there's a yard, and then there's a house in the back. And it's an independent house. It's nice. It's big, and that's where I live. But the back of the house that's like facing the street, which would be the quote unquote front house, like this, like you see in this picture, it'd be like similar to what you see in this picture. The front here is facing the street, and then you go down a little side thing, and then in the back you would see a house that would be mine. So my effing neighbor decides that he wants to bang pots, and instead of going to the front and banging to the street, he bangs this crap right in my ear, man. Oh, I was so mad. And That's one of the first times I yelled at him. The only time. But then he let his dog take a poop in front of my gate. So I just picked up the poop and put it in his front door. I was like, man, you're gonna go like tit for tat with me. Don't do it, and I will escalate. So terrible time. This pot banging, I did not like. I haven't heard it in a long time. I think Brazilians themselves grew out of it, but it was a big thing here. It's called a panelaço. Panelaço. When we get our friend Marcos back on the show, I'm sure he will tell us a little bit more about that. Anyway, guys, I think that is it. That is all. Das ist alles. Here we are. There I am. Where is Mr. P? Oh, there he is. Guys, thank you for coming out, hanging with us on the Brazil Expat Journal here on this Monday night. Next week, I will be having my friend Karen Almeida on, which I should have gotten a picture of us so you can see us together. Um, but I forgot. And yeah, we're going to be talking about dating because she wrote a book about dating. And in fact, one of the first times I met her in person was for a book launch she had for one of her books about digital or dating in the digital age, which is really, really cool. And she's also from Minas Gerais, and we talk a lot about Minas Gerais here on the channel. And we've never actually had somebody here that's from Minas. And so she is from Minas Gerais. So she will have a lot to share with us about that. Let me see if I can just find something really quick here, Pete. You've never met Karen, have you, Pete? I don't think you have you?
No police, though, no.
All right. Well, you will meet her. She is a sweetheart. But oh, another thing that's important regarding this is that we will be on a little bit earlier. We're shooting for 9:30. Oh, this is the picture I was looking for. So sorry, guys. I was kind of enrolando a little bit. I was beating about the bush just a little bit. But there you go. Look, and that's our friend Watif, who, rest in peace, passed away. There's Karen right there, and there's me, and I'm my all red. I was on red that day. But I went to this little restaurant here that we'll probably talk about on the show, which served Philly cheesesteaks. And guys, not the best, but I just appreciated that they had a restaurant that was like just Philly inspired. All the posters, and I still think they're still around. So I might go again because food improves a little bit. So we'll talk to Karen a little bit about that on the show because she'll be in Sao Paulo. Yeah, food in Minas is the best in Brazil. So we'll definitely talk food. It's gonna be a Minas episode, and she is a sweetheart, guys. So 9:30, okay, because she's an early bird. She goes to bed like at 9, right? So she's staying up special just for us. So please tune in just a little bit earlier next Monday, guys. We gotta go. We gotta wake up early. Pete's tired. Pete's probably sleeping already. Until next time, I love you guys, and I'm going off the air. Bye bye, Pete.